And we're in Zayin, right?
Zayin, yeah. Tet Zayin.
Tet.
What is the page?
Page Samek Vav.
And the piece starts with Yesh Chesron.
Yesh Chesron, כן. Page Samek Vav.
Okay, here we go. So we're talking in this chapter. We might actually finish today. We'll see how fast we go. In Perek Tet, we're talking about the effect of tshuva on the ratzon, on our inner desire, on our deep soul desire. I think this is the last time we're going to meet before Ben Azmanim, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
Next time we'll meet, it's going to be up on Har Bayit B'ezrat Hashem. So it says the tzaddik. Yesh cheson betchunata shel tshuva hanemucha. At a very basic level, there's two different kinds of tshuva. There's a lower level of tshuva and a higher level of tshuva. The lower level of tshuva is tshuva from fear, and in that there's different levels of fear. There's a fear of onesh, right? Like the Ramchal talks about a fear of onesh. Three different kinds of fear. He's scared of getting punished. I don't want to. I'm not gonna. I really would like to break Shabbat, but I'm not going to because I'm scared what's going to happen to me in the next world or in this world. Or yirat achet, fear of sin, which is higher than fear of punishment. It's not that he's worried about his own punishment. It's that he doesn't want to. He's scared of sinning. He's scared of sinning. He doesn't want to bother Hashem, so to speak, or to go against Hashem. So he doesn't want to sin. And then there's a higher level, which is not what Rav Kook is talking about here, but it's called Yira Ila'ah, or Yirat Aromamut, which is an exalted level of fear. It's very close to dveikut, attachment to God. It's the word Yira, fear, we translate it as fear, but it's really, I prefer to translate it as awe, right? And because the shoresh of Yira is the word ro'eh, to see. When I have a vision of God, when having an experience of Hashem's presence, that's called yira. And yirat aromamut is exalted fear, which is exalted awe. It's this state of being. It's similar to fear in the sense that you're kind of like you're frozen, kind of in a certain sense. You're not going to go. You can't go against Hashem, but it's because you're having a great revelation of Hashem, right? As opposed to from a place of more like a fear. But in any event, like we said last time, the Gemara says that if a person does tshuva out of fear, so it's a great thing. Tshuva is always great, right? And even in that transforms the sins that he did in the past, that he did intentionally, and it makes them unintentional sins, right? But if a person does tshuva on the higher level, which is the ultimate level, how we're all supposed to aspire for, to attain, is tshuva me'ahava, to do tshuva from a place of love. It's not about me. It's not about my cheshbon. It's not about what my olam haba is going to look like. It's about, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm in love with you. I'm in love with you. I'm so in love with you that I just want to be better. I want to do more. Right? There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh that once a woman came to him and she was very adamant. She wanted a blessing. Oh, Shalom Aleichem. You brighten my day with your face, and also with those great trees on your shirt. So a woman came to the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, and she didn't have children for a long time, and she wanted a blessing for children, and the Baal Shem Tov saw that it was very, very difficult to give her a bracha. Why? Because tzaddikim are able to see a little bit deeper than we are, and they see up in the upper worlds, and they know what's good for a person, what's not good for a person. And he saw that this woman really wasn't supposed to have children, but she was so adamant, and she wouldn't let the Baal Shem Tov go until they gave her a bracha, so he gave her a bracha. So it says at that moment, the story goes that at that moment the Baal Shem Tov heard in Shemayim that they announced, Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer, you'd lost your world to come. You went too far. Right? This woman wasn't supposed to have children, and you knew it, and anyway you blessed her. And now we have a klal. The Gemara says that if a tzaddik gives a blessing, or makes a gezerah, he makes a decree, so in heaven, so to speak, they have to do it. They fulfill it because the person is a tzaddik. So Hashem fulfills the tzaddik's decree. And this was against Hashem's ratzon, so to speak. So he said, that's it. That you paid for this child that you gave her with your world to come. So how would you feel at that moment? Baal Shem Tov was ecstatic. He said he started dancing. He was thrilled. He said, now finally I can serve God totally clean, just for my love of God. I'm not going to get anything from it. I don't have to worry about my world to come anymore. Certainly he wasn't worried about onesh or punishment or anything like that. But now it's just totally clean, right? And then they gave it back to him. It doesn't say if he was as happy when they gave it back to him. That's the story. But that's the story. And so the point is that tshuva mi'ahava, when a person does tshuva from a place of love, is from this place of just, he's no longer making, a cheshbon of, is this good for me? Is it not good for me? What am I going to get out of it? Right? It's like an old couple, right? That they've been loving each other for years. They're over all the stuff. They've worked out all their stuff as a couple. They haven't fought for years, even though little fights maybe here and there. But it's not even a question. They're totally in love with each other. They do so many acts of love for each other throughout the day. They're not even thinking, well, if I wash the dishes, then she'll be happy with me. And if she's happy with me, so then maybe I'll get a good dinner. And then he's not making any cheshbonis like that. I just love her. I wash the dishes because I know it makes her happy, right? I do this because it makes her happy. She does this for him because, right? It's out of love. That's the highest level. Now, back into Rav Kook. If a person does tshuva from the lower level, out of fear, which all of us do tshuva out of fear, right? It's scary. Not just the onesh, but also like it's scary going against the shezvu. We started this year today talking about how like we've been waiting for Beit HaMikdash for a long time already. Enough already, right? I don't want to be doing anything that's contributing to the prevention of the Beit HaMikdash happening, for the redemption happening, right? People, all the pain in the world, we're ready for it to be finished already. I don't want to be contributing to any more of that pain, right? So we do tshuva from a place of fear also. It's a great thing to do tshuva from place of yira, but there's something that there's a certain negative side effect that it has on us. Shehi machleshet et ratzono shel adam, that it weakens a little bit the ratzon of a person. Why? If I make a bracha real quick. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol neh bidvoro.
Sorry, what weakens the person?
It weakens his ratzon
What does?
when he's doing tshuva out of fear.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I'll see if I'll be able to explain this, how I'm thinking about it. If you have a person who has no fear, there are no limitations in their life. They're kind of like, I don't know, almost like a child, just exuberance, a childlike exuberance and excitement and desire for life, So sometimes they're not really grounded, such a person, right? They don't have their feet on the ground. They want this, they want that, they want to do this, right? And they're a dreamer, and it's a beautiful thing to watch, right? And the old people are all sitting around watching, say, yeah, just wait till they, grow up a little bit and they see it's not so easy, right, to accomplish all those things or whatever, right? But it's a beautiful thing to watch, and you don't want to take the stars out of their eyes. You want to let them be that way, right? Once they start to meet the real world, so to speak, and they realize that life's a little bit more complicated than they thought, right? But they're still trying to achieve their goals or whatever, so they become a little bit more tzumtzam. How do you say? A little bit more constricted.
Sealed, hidden.
A little bit sealed, a little bit. Their fire gets dimmed a little bit, right? So too, if a person is why do they come to Hashem? Think about tshuva get said. Your first engagement with, I think for most people, the first engagement with Hashem and the Torah is one of excitement and beauty, right? This is beautiful. This looks amazing. I want this. I want to be close to Hashem. It looks like such a beautiful lifestyle of pleasure and spiritual delights and love, right? And then they say, well, here's this book. It's called the Shulchan Aruch. It's about 5,000 volumes, and really teeny print. You got to do all this stuff, and you don't do all this stuff, right? All of a sudden, that fire, that spirit becomes just a little bit, right? So it can weaken. It weakens the desire because a person has to be more exact. You have to be more precise. You have a couple that's in love with each other, right? So if you're feeling just like the exuberant love, you can pour out, you can write poetry, you can do all kind, right? But you can also say a word that could be hurtful because you're not really filtered, right? You're not being 100% careful and exacting and precise, sometimes you can trample people like that, right? So doing tshuva out of fear is constricting you, but it's refining you. But and that's a beautiful thing, and we don't want to stop that. However, there's something that comes with that it kind of weakens your fire a little bit. That's what Rav Kook is saying. So it's a certain downside, it's a certain side effect. Upogemet b'zeh ishiyuto, and this, in a certain sense, can blemish the person's personality. And sometimes you see it. I don't know. Maybe you guys have had this experience here at Mechon Mir or in other places. When you see a Baal Tshuva, and they were full of life, and then as they get closer to Torah, you kind of like they become a little bit more subdued, right? And you can, and even to yourself, I experienced this myself. Like, where's all that personality? Where's all that livelihood that you had inside, right? Where's all that exuberance, right? So it can dull the person's personality. It's not a permanent thing. Just that's the effect that it has on the person. And so that blemish, that lacking that we just described, it becomes refilled when the thought of tshuva comes to its full ripe state. Because doing tshuva from a place of fear, whereas it's great and it's necessary and every one of us must do it, right? But a person only reaches their completion when they're really at least aspiring and connecting to the world of tshuva from love, right? It's a love, right? You guys know that Rabbi Akiva said that about the Tanakh. He said that all of the Tanakh is holy, all the books are holy, but the Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, that's the Holy of Holies, right? Because there was a discussion if that should be included in Tanakh. We had many books of different prophets and different writings that we had, and then when we came back from our exile in Bavel, we came back to the Second Temple period. The men of the Great Assembly, they established what were going to be the actual, what they call the canon, the actual books of Tanakh, 24 books of Tanakh. And there's a discussion if Shir HaShirim was going to be included or not, the Song of Songs. And the reason is because Shir HaShirim is a love story. If you read it without understanding any of what it's alluding to, it sounds like a love story, explicit kind of love story between a man and a woman, right? It's really a love story between a Kadosh Baruch Hu and an Am Yisrael, right? But because the possibility of people making a mistake, there was a discussion: should we include it or not? So it was included. But when Rabbi Akiva talks about it in Masechet Yadayim, he talks about was it going to be included or not? Rabbi Akiva says, Chas v'shalom, Chas v'shalom. There was never a discussion about Shir HaShirim. Of course it would be included, because all of the books of Tanakh are holy, but the Shir HaShirim is holy of holies. What's so holy about it? Right? Because that's the essence of what's happening here. You talk about bringing a sacrifice, you talk about giving tzedakah, you talk about, what lulav is kosher and what is not, right? You talk about all the different mitzvahs, and you talk about all the prophecies. All of those are great and they're amazing and they're parts of the story. But the essence, the soul of the story, therefore it's the Holy of Holies, is that this is a love story between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Does it mean that those people who said that it shouldn't be included in the Tanakh is the one who didn't understand it?
It could be. It's hard to say. I don't know. They were coming from a different halachic perspective, which is not really so important right now for this conversation. But and it could be that Rabbi Akiva agreed with that also, that it was a discussion, but he was just trying to make a point that. Right, that a different point or a more nuanced point, but the point is that when I'm doing tshuva from fear, tshuva meira, so I'm thinking, well, how do I walk? How do I talk? What are the words that I say? How do I conduct myself? Right? How do I go to sleep? How do I wake up? Right? What concentration do I have when I'm making my brachas over this? And sometimes you can get so caught up in the details that you're forgetting the actual love story that's happening here. So it only comes to completion. Your tshuva is only reaching a completeness when you're bringing it back into that context, and that's what Rav Kook says. Then that place inside of your personality and that what's the word? That liveliness, that exuberance of your neshama becomes restored only at that when you reach that. Because then that lower level of tshuva from fear becomes unified with a higher level of tshuva, which is tshuva from love. שכל עיקר כוונתה היא לא בהחלשת הרצון ובשבירת האופי האישי של האדם, כי אם באימוץ רצונו והגברת הערך של אישיותו. Because then it becomes clear that it was never the intention to dull the person's fire, to lower their ratzon. That was never the intention. The intention was really to elevate the ratzon, right? And it was never desired to break the person's personality, right? I mean, think about it. Think about a person who grew up without any Torah values whatsoever, and all of a sudden you come into the Torah values, and there's so many values. There's so many. About Tshuva changes thousands of ways of his behaviors and his thoughts, his speech pattern. Think about it. Think about it. Just think about Lashon Hara. Just think about Lashon Hara. It's crazy, right? I remember when I was a young Baal Tshuva, and I still a young Baal Tshuva, but when I was a younger Baal Tshuva, and I was in Israel, and I came back for the summer one time, and I got together with a group of friends, and they started talking about someone they saw was uncomfortable. Lashon Hara. They saw that I was uncomfortable, and they knew what the concept of Lashon Hara. Because I grew up, I never heard of the concept of Lashon Hara. Of course, you could talk as long as the person doesn't hear you. You can talk about them. What's the problem, right? Not that there was a value in gossiping, but there was no concept of like you have to be very careful in your words and clean speech, right? And one of my friends said, "Oh, don't tell me now. We can't now, Micha, around you. We can't even talk about anybody. Like all the fun you took away, now we can't even talk about it, right?" So think about that. Think about how you refine your speech, right? All of a sudden, the Baal Tshuva, who before he wasn't even thinking about what he was who he was talking about, or how he was talking about, what language he was using, and now he's thinking. I don't want to use that word. I want to say that every word, like our sages say, the person's every word should be measured. The Ramban HaKadosh says in his letter, he says you should think about every word before you bring it out of your mouth. And there's some people that are really like that. Anybody met a person like that? It's amazing to be around a person. My wife is actually like that. It used to drive me crazy when we were first married because she would speak slowly, right? But it's an amazing thing. You see a person with refined speech, right? Not like us, unfiltered, right? So, but think about so. At a certain point, you say, "Come on, just be yourself. Say what you want to say. Say what you're thinking," right? It constricts you. I want your personality, right? But the point is not in order to snuff out my personality. The point is not to snuff out the vitality of my life. It's in order to refine it and to elevate it. He says, not the shvirat ofi haishi shel adam, ki im beimutz ratzono. It's to engage his or to literally means to adopt his ratzon, meaning to how you call it in a tevit, to make a the English word just escaped me. To guide it. It's not the really word that I was looking for, but that's good enough. And to bring out his true self. The way that he talked before, when he used to talk about people and with a filthy mouth, or that he ate whatever he wanted to eat without thinking about it, right? And now he thinks about it, he makes a bracha, and he's careful, and he doesn't eat too much because he doesn't want to overeat. He wants to eat like it says in the Rambam, and right. All of that is to bring out his true self. That wasn't his true self when he was just limitless and without conscientiousness. That wasn't his true self. Maybe there was a certain type of like vitality they had, right? But it wasn't really him. Now we have to constrict him in order to bring out his true self, to guide it, right? Umitoch kach hazdonot mitapchot l'zchuyot. And from this place, then all of those past sins that he did intentionally, they become merits. They become like mitzvot. Like we said, if a person does tshuva from love, all of his past sins become transformed. We said before, it's like like I heard from Moshe Weinberger once. He said, like after 120 years, they're playing the video of your life. That's what happens in heaven. They replay your life with you. And it says all the souls of your family and loved ones and tzaddikim are there. They're all watching. Everybody's got their popcorn and chocolates, and they're watching the movie of your life. And you're thinking, oh no, I hope when they get to this chapter, I'm gonna head out I'm gonna go to the bathroom, for a couple of minutes, all right? But you can't leave. You have to watch the whole thing. and exactly those acts that you're scared, if you did tshuva out of love, those acts that you're scared for anybody to see, and you didn't want to have to relive, those become acts of beautiful, it says zchuyot, of merits. You transform it, right? Now think about that just for a second. Think about it. It's an amazing thing. Why should we be able to transform? Okay, I did what I did. Tell me that it becomes erased, right? A person ripped off a bunch of people. He stole stuff. I did all kinds of acts, like So it's enough for me that you just erase it from the record, right? Person who has a criminal record, if they tell them, that they're going to erase his record, he's very happy. He doesn't need to get, what do you call it? To bestow a doctorate degree for all those acts that he did. I'd rather just forget that the whole thing ever happened, right? Here it becomes merits. Why? On a very, very basic level, because once you come to the level of tshuva from love, you've gotten to the actual soul, to the heart of what you're doing in this world, right? And that means that everything that you did in your past, even though it was totally misguided, and even though it was at that time causing darkness in the world, but it was all part of your journey. Your life, from the very first day that you come into this world, and even before, until the very last breath that we have in this world, it's all one item. It's part of your journey. And it took you being there to get to here. But if you got here, you did it, right? That's the gold medal. You got to the place of the heart and soul of what you're doing in this world. Now all of your whole life becomes transformed and becomes a part of that. It's all part of that, right? As long as that's what he's doing in his life, a life of tshuva from love. It's all a love story. Uveshuv rasha merishato v'asa mishpat u'tzedakah alehem hu yichyeh. And then brings a pasuk. It says that, and when the rasha returns, when he does tshuva from his evil ways, v'asa mishpat u'tzedakah, and he does justice in the tzedakah, alehem, upon them, hu yichyeh. Hashem lives upon them, right? So the point of this piece in one or two sentences is that even though we have to go through the lower level of tshuva in order to get to the ultimate level of tshuva from love, and even though that lower level of tshuva, it constricts a person, it kind of puts out his fire, dulls his fire a little bit. All of that is really just a temporary thing in order to be able to get him to have his fire to become really channeled. That's what I was looking for. To channel his soul properly, that he can, a full expression of his soul and of his ratzon, B'ezrat Hashem, which will come out in the end. Clear? Now we're ready to do it, right? Sounds pretty good.
Right. Question. This is for love. If you do sugar, but sometimes for love you can spoil yourself and you can make too much, but you can uncurious of what you should do, and then you make do many things that you're not supposed to do.
Mistakes. You can make mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Right.
in the end, it can be done.
Exactly, and that's why. Good, beautiful question, and that's why dafka you need both levels of tshuva. You have to do tshuva from a level of fear, and it says that fear is the yesod, reshit chokhmah yirat Hashem. The beginning of true wisdom is the fear of God. It doesn't say the beginning of wisdom is the love of God, because that's the higher level. You have to start off with the yira, right? And that's why, and you see this. You see, sometimes people come to Torah and they're all excited about Torah just for the positive and the fun and the beautiful love aspect. And then you say, well, here's the Shulchan Aruch, and they say, I'll just stick with the Kabbalat Shabbat, right? Eventually, it fizzles out. It can't continue. Just like a couple. Lahavdil, you have a couple that falls in love with each other, but they don't want to actually be committed to each other properly and be kind to each other and hold back the words that you're not supposed to say and behave in the way that right, and to clean up after yourself by fixing if you made a mistake, right? So that's why you need the yira. You can't just have the ava. But the yira is really just a kli that we should be able to have the ava properly. Ultimately, it's not about the yira. It's about the ava. Right? That's the ultimate story of what's happening.
I have a question. Is Europe connected to like negative commandments, like don't lotus?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it says. There's a mitzvah to love God and a mitzvah to fear God. And the Sfarim Kedoshim say that that the mitzvah of loving God is represented by all the mitzvot that said the positive commandments, and is the right, and the ultimate, and really those two, to love God and to fear God, are also connected to the first two mitzvot of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, to believe in God. That's like the positive commandment. And Lo yelech Elohim achrim al panai, and that you shouldn't have other gods before me. That contains in it all of the Lo says, all the negative commandments, and fear of God. And so that way, just last thing, and then when at Mount Sinai, all of Am Yisrael heard those two mitzvot, and that really that encapsulated the entire Torah.
Would it make sense to start with the low essays and then try to move to the essays, or
as a principle of like growing?
I feel like it's easier to do low essays than essays.
Right.
I don't know if it's easier, but maybe as a starting point, it's harder to like do all the prayers, all the fill and everything all the time.
Right.
Whereas opposed to just I'm not going to do that. But that's
right. I think it's it's an interesting question, and I think that it's very much dependent on the person, because some people would say the opposite. It's like, just give me. I love those mitzvahs. They fill me up with so much light, but the Lota says they drag me down. It's too heavy for me. I think that I mean we don't do that. We don't start with one or the other, but as a matter of principle, I would say that for each individual, it has to be a very customized journey in the mitzvot of what they take on, what they don't take on, and taking everything on in the right time. I remember when I took on mitzvot, one of the last mitzvot that I took on was tzitzit, one of the very last mitzvot. And I remember I had a friend. I was already totally shomer Shabbat, shomer mitzvot, and everything, and I was on Shabbat, and I was having a discussion with a friend back in college who grew up religious, and I said, I don't wear tzitzit, and he said, what? He didn't believe me. He looked down my shirt. He said, what? He got so upset at me. How can you not wear tzitzit? But it's hot. I don't know about you guys. It's hot. I grew up in Texas. Texas is just as hot as here. In Houston and Austin, it's hard for me to put on tzitzit. Eventually I did it. But you have to take it easy. You have to have rachmanis on yourself. You have to know what's right for you, right? And what you feel connected to. What especially at the beginning, what gives you light, what gives you a little bit of structure. I always say you push yourself a little bit with a lot of gentleness, but keep on pushing yourself. And you want to progress, right? But with a lot of compassion and gentleness. Not too much, because if you push too much, then it backfires, right? But interesting question, interesting point. Okay, ח' התשובה נוטלת את הרצון שכבר נתגשם במעשה וקנה לו כוח הוויה של גבורה. If a person is not in touch with their deeper ratzon, so the only part of their ratzon that they are in touch with is the lower parts of their ratzon, which is desires for in this world, or misguided deeper desires. For instance, everybody has a desire. Everybody has a desire to be attached to God. Like what we were talking about before, this love story of the context of what we're doing here is a love story with God. Everybody has a desire inside of them for that, even if they don't know, even if they're not aware of it, right? Even if they've never even heard about God, and they would argue with you that there is no God, their soul is really pining and yearning to be connected to God, and they may have never experienced it. They may experience it in other ways, or they may translate it in other ways, right? Kind of like you guys have heard me say before, how sometimes a person, there's something itching in his soul, and he's not getting it, that it's something spiritual is lacking, and he goes to the refrigerator and looks what he has in the refrigerator, right? He feels like something's missing. He's not what sure it is, so he wants to fill it with something physical, because that's how he's translating that sensation, right? So too, a person could be seeking love in all the wrong places, so to speak. He could be seeking to be attached and connected to things in this world, which it's okay to be connected to your spouse and to your friends and to Am Yisrael and the humankind. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a replacement for his desire to attach to God, because he doesn't get it. He's mistranslating it, right? He can attach himself to more shallow things in this world, and he can attach it to even to really low things, right? Once he takes action with that, right, and he becomes I don't know, whatever he does whatever he does, right? So it says that ratzon became, there's no translation for this, physicalized. Maybe there's a word for that. I don't know. It's like it becomes something that was spiritual and it became physical, right? Meaning it materialized. That's a good word, right? But and that established inside of him a power, a force of gvura, of strength, but not necessarily good strength in this context. Right? It becomes something strong in him. It becomes, I have a different way to I think describe what Rav Kook is talking about. We have neural pathways. You guys have heard of neural pathways. When you think about something, and when you have a certain chain of thought, a certain series of thoughts, the more you think in that way, the more those neural pathways become solidified in your brain, actually physically. And one of the contemporary books about neuroplasticity, he describes it like skiing. I think we've spoken about this before. That if you have fresh powder snow on the mountain, so if you're the skier, you could go wherever you want to go. The whole thing's open before you. But once it hasn't snowed for a couple of days and there's been a lot of skiing, so paths become carved out in the snow. And even though you want to go left, but the path is going right, you can't do it. It's impossible to go against it. It's the same thing in the neural pathways. When you thought about something over and over, right? You've associated something over and over, right? So it becomes very difficult to change that pattern of thinking. It is possible to change the pattern of thinking. That's what the whole science of neuroplasticity. You're allowed to. Your brain is like plastic. It's malleable, but it's very difficult. So too here. Once he's translated his ratzon into something physical, something cheaper, something more shallow, and he's done that. So now, and it can become attached to something even negative. That becomes a force in his life. That association, that attachment. Does that make sense? What I'm saying, or not so much?
Yeah.
Should I give I'll give a concrete. He became his desire for deeper attachment. He translated it as the lust for relations between men and women, in a cheap way, right? Not in a holy way, not in a sanctified way, and that becomes his kind of go-to fill for this deeper ratzon. Right? And now he doesn't translate it as something holy. It's really something holy and deep in his soul. It's not just a physical carnal lust that he's having, right? It's something deeper that he's trying to fulfill here, right? But once he's gone that path so many times, right, or even once here, Rav Kook says, so it gives a strength to that, and it becomes very, very difficult to break that. He says, it even becomes more powerful in a certain sense than his natural power or faculty of ethics and of faith and belief in God. Right? So you take a person, Baal Tshuva, let's say, who comes and now, he's had many, many girlfriends in his life, and all of a sudden you tell him you're not allowed to, forget about touching them, you're not even supposed to look at them. Right? Well, that's very, very difficult. And it feels like everything in his body and his heart is saying, I can't do that. Right? I'm too built into that lifestyle to be able to change that. So he says, well, so what are you supposed to do then? As a person stuck, he says, but once the light, the godly light, starts to really become awakened inside of him, yafeh, in a beautiful way, meaning in a strong way, איננו חוזר לתוהו כי אם פועל הוא בעוזו על יסודו של העולם להטביע בהוויה כולה רצון כביר לאור וטוב. וזונות נעשים כזכויות ממש. Another another allusion to tshuva from love. He says, once that godly light it takes a hold of him. So he says that desire is uprooted from its by its roots, so to speak, and he feels like deeply entrenched in this physical way that he's expressed this desire, right? But it becomes uprooted because the godly light overtakes that, even though it's very difficult, but it overtakes that, and it doesn't return to that same place. Rather, it becomes firmly established inside of him to be an understanding and a desire for goodness and for light. And then all of his intentional sins become like meretz mamish, right? Meaning, the same pleasure or some type of fulfillment that he was getting from that type of act, right? He doesn't. He re-channels that back to its holy place, right? A lot of times, Baalei Tshuva have a difficult time. I'm speaking just openly here about this subject because it's really, really important. A lot of times, Baalei Tshuva have a difficult time in intimacy in marriage, and that's because they have a history of physical or even emotional intimacy before, and it was a very different form, and it doesn't feel holy or pure enough for them, and they kind of associate that with all the negative aspects of whatever lifestyle they were living before, right? So the Rav Kook is saying is that once the light of tshuva really becomes entrenched, and you realize that Hashem is not trying to make you suffer, right? Like I heard a Rav say recently, when you talk about food and pleasure. Sometimes when you read in the Psalm, it sounds like like we're not allowed to have pleasure in this world. We're not supposed to have pleasure. So Hashem didn't create ice cream so that you'll suffer, right? He created these things that you should enjoy them, just that your intention should be correct, right? Hashem, the holiest, one of the holiest mitzvahs that we have is to get married. The first mitzvah in the book is pruavu, right? It's to be fruitful and multiply. What simcha is greater than a Jewish wedding, right? And really, ultimately, what are we celebrating? We're celebrating that relationship, which to the rest of the world is in so many ways is such a cheap and degraded relationship, right? So Hashem didn't create that relationship. It's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a holy thing. The Ramban HaKadosh has a letter where he's discussing the relationship between a husband and wife, and he calls it Igeret HaKodesh. It's the holy letter, right? So this is very, very, very holy. The fact that we have previous associations with it as something that's not so holy, that's only because it was misguided and not channeled properly. And once a person channels it properly, so then the holiness of what he was trying to achieve then, but he had no idea, now becomes something very, very holy, and it becomes like a transformation. Okay. Questions, comments, complaints before we move on to Tet? I hope I'm speaking clearly. Is making sense of what I'm saying?
With the neuroplasticity thing.
Yeah.
What are you said when this light shines in, it seems very abstract in terms of when that chain switches to where you can break out of that pattern, that
Right.
rut you get stuck in.
Right.
So is there any way to bring it down to earth? Any things that we can do to awaken that neuroplasticity within ourselves?
Right. That's a great question. And yeah, Rav Kook, he talks about this big thing and also says, and then when this happens, everything, right, it kind of sounds very passive, right?
Sure.
So in this piece, Rav Kook, he's not really giving any practical advice. He's just explaining that he's kind of I think he's giving hope that how things will change. But in general, a lot of it is siyata d'shmaya. Siyata d'shmaya is heavenly help, heavenly assistance, right? That the light should hit. But I think that for in general, that we have to seek inspiration. We have to seek Jewish experiences, Torah experiences, which are inspiring to us. To be around them as much as you can, right? If you have a certain place that you like to daven, that really hits you in a certain way. If you have certain music that really touches you in a certain way, a certain style of Torah, a certain style of living the mitzvahs and expressing the mitzvahs that's beautiful to you, and that's how you get the light, right? my Rav once said how to choose a rabbi. Everybody's got to have a rabbi. How do you choose your Rav? So he said, I think two or three criteria. Let's see. Let's go to see if I remember it. He said one is a person that follows the Shulchan Aruch without any compromises. Meaning halacha is the very foundation of their life. Two is that they're a person that's always growing. They didn't get to a certain place and said, "This is where I am. This is where I'll remain." They're always growing. Doesn't mean they're necessarily making major changes, moving from one community to another, or something like that. But they're always growing. They're always increasing. And the third one, as he says, is in that his life, his lifestyle, and his expression of the Torah is beautiful to you. And you look at it and you're like, wow, it's gewalt, it's beautiful, right? Those are the three criteria for choosing a row. Right?
So, minor follow-up if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Like willpower alone, because we speak a lot about like Hashem's will, and then like with this metaphor of the ski slope, it's like sometimes after there's already this path dug in, you want to break out of it, and you can go straight, but you can go outside of the path, but you end up falling.
Right.
And so is there any amount of like you can just will your way through it, or you need that heavenly assistance?
Right. No, you absolutely can. It's another great question. You absolutely can. And like on the slope, unless it's really, really deeply entrenched in iced, snow.
Yeah.
So if a person uses, just sheer brute force, they can change. As a matter of fact, in the world of neuroplasticity, that's what a lot of the excitement about neuroplasticity is that it feels like I have to think in this way, but I don't. And if you forcibly, or what I like to call manually shift your thought, right? So you can actually change the path, right? It hurts at first a little bit.
Yeah.
It takes a tremendous amount of effort, but eventually you can change that path, and you actually carve a new path in your mind, right? And when I say carve a new path, literally they can map it on a physical level to see how your brain physically changes when you change the way that you think, right? Which is unbelievable discovery in the in the world of psychology. People are super excited about neuroplasticity, and in our sense, right, like it also is neuroplasticity, like changing your behavior, even though it's very, very difficult, However, if a person thinks that that will be my vehicle for change always, it runs out. You run out of steam at a certain point, right? Brute force. If you can what do you call it? You can force it through for a while, but eventually you get tired, you get hungry, and you need to refill your energy stores, and that in our terminology is spiritual inspiration, right? We have to be inspired. That's our juice. That's our delic. That's our gasoline. That's what makes the engine run, right? Depending on it's your stage in your life, like you need more of it, you need less of it. You can generate more of it yourself, right? Other things can generate it. Certain things that inspired you before might not inspire you now. You always have to seek where your heart is at any given moment. But you always have to be filling up that tank if you want to keep on traveling down the road. And that's just how it goes. Okay. Tet. Let's see if we have time for this whole piece. Let's try. We'll try to go fast. Yeah, you guys with me? Seatbelts, everybody? Kol chet noveh mipgam b'yocholet b'neh. Wow, you know what? Actually, this piece is actually. Read that first line. It's actually quite complicated. Let's skip it. Let's go to Yud. And then B'ezrat Hashem, we get back together. Bli neder. We'll try to remember to do Tet, because Yud is a little bit smaller. Okay. HaTeshuva v'chol alichot ma'asiyot shela. Teshuva, with all of its practical and actionable pathways. Im haruach haklalit hasholetet b'ikara b'yamim hamiyuchadim l'teshuva, with a general spirit that is in the air, that rules, especially during the special days of teshuva. Special days of teshuva, like we've actually started now, but more specifically in Elul, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, these days that are unique to tshuva. There's a certain spirit in the air of tshuva. Im godel hato'elet shela, with all the great benefit that comes from that, lizakechet et nefashot, to refine our souls. Right? In other words, when you come to Elul and there's tshuva in the air, you come to Rosh Hashanah, you come to Yom Kippur, and you walk in. You know that feeling when you walk in the shul on Yom Kippur. You guys have had it here in Eretz Yisrael. You can hear it's very, very, very palpable. You walk into the shul on Yom Kippur. It's not like walking into shul on Shabbos. It's not like walking into shul on Purim. You know, you feel it. It's amazing. There's an amazing spirit of tshuva in the air, and it has a tremendous, that spirit alone has a tremendous value to help purify us and to refine us. Le'aden et haruach, to soften our spirits, u'letaher et ha'ma'asim mikiuram, and to help us to reshape our actions, and from the negativity from our actions. But nonetheless, with that special and unique power and the beauty and the gentleness of that, it also has inside of it, like we've been talking about a couple of pieces before, a certain type of weakening. Right? There's something that you walk into, you right, and you walk into Yom Kippur, and even if you're excited and you're feeling the juice, but it also kind of like, feels heavy. Right? It feels heavy, and you can embrace that heaviness, etc. But it feels heavy. Right? Heavy means it weakens us just a little bit. And he said, Rav Kook says, you might think that you're exempt from this. He says that nobody's exempt from this weakening aspect of those days of tshuva. Even the greatest giburim, meaning the biggest tzaddikim who are serving Hashem strictly from love, etc. Right? It comes with it. It's part and parcel of it. Right? And it continues, כשמקמצין את הרצון, כשכופפין את עוז החיים על ידי הסלידה הפנימית והנטייה לשוב מכל חטא. When we are gathering up our ratzon, our desire, and we're taking the strength of our life and to an inner rejection of our sins and our inclination to sin, מתקמץ גם כן הרצון של הטוב. So I always say, the example I always use is also like in therapy. A lot of times people, because of certain trauma or whatever, even if it's micro traumas, there's certain emotions that we don't accept about ourselves. We don't want to feel anger. We don't want to feel sadness. We don't want to feel shame. Right? So sometimes what we do is we find a way to totally cut off that emotion. But the problem is you can't cut off one emotion. You have access to all your emotions, or you have access to none of your emotions. It's kind of like in the old recording studio panels, how you have like a million different tracks, and then you have like the master volume. So on any particular track, any microphone, you could make the volume go up and down. You could close that one, but when it comes to having emotions or not having emotions, feeling them or not, you only have one panel. It's the master volume. If you turn them all up, so you experience all your emotions in a rich way. If you turn any one of them down, you turn them all down. So too here, if I'm taking my ratzon, I'm taking a hold of the reins of my desire, and I'm focusing on rejecting all the bad that I've done in my life, and rejecting my inclination to bad. I also, by doing that, it's a master volume type of thing that I also, in a certain sense, I also take my positive desires, and my thirst for life, my vitality, also become a little bit weakened with that, right? Because they're connected, in a certain sense. It turns out when a person is trying to purify himself here, it's Yom Kippur, it's Rosh Hashanah, it's right, this purification process also kind of weakens him. שסובל חולה, כזאת שסובל חולה שמתרפא על ידי הזרמת אלקטרית חזקה, שאומנם גירשה את הארץ שבמחלתו, אבל החלישה את הכוח החי והבריא שבו. Just like Rav Kook writes, that just like a person who's physically sick and he needs some type of really intensive treatment, and when they give him that treatment, it weakens his whole system. It's like you take antibiotics. Antibiotics are very destructive for the body. right? People don't know how destructive they are, but they save your life. On the other hand, right? If a person needs antibiotics and he doesn't take them, it can literally be the difference between life and death. But when he takes it, it's kind of like a friend of mine who's a nutritionist. It's like an atom bomb for your gut. In your gut you have your microbiome. You guys know about the microbiome. It's all your the flora and fauna in your gut, which is 80% of your immune system. A lot of our mental health is also connected to our gut, right? So the antibiotics, it destroys the negative bacteria that you're trying to get rid of, but it also destroys all the positive bacteria and the healthful bacteria. It doesn't distinguish between them, so it just nukes it all, right?
It's like chemo.
Exactly, it's like chemo, and it could be that that's what Rav Kook is talking about here, because Rav Kook himself went through chemo, and so on one hand you need it because it's life giving. On the other hand, it weakens your entire system. So he says, Shavim al ken yamim shel simchat. So therefore, Kadosh Baruch Hu, in His infinite wisdom, we need Rosh Hashanah, we need Elul, we need the 10 days of Tshuva, we need Yom Kippur. If we would just stop there, we would be pure, but weak. Right? If that's where the holidays ended. Right? There's no greater simcha than after Yom Kippur. Right? But what if you didn't have Sukkot coming up in a couple days? It's hard to imagine a world like that. Right? And that's where Rav Kook says that's when it becomes the great simcha of your life. The vitality becomes restored to you. Shel chedvat nefesh, the joy of the soul. Lekomem et haratzon hatov ve'oz ha'chaim, in order to reestablish and to rebuild that good desire inside of you, and the strength of life, of the pure strength of life. Az tiyeh tshuva shlema. That's when tshuva is complete. Until he has the restoration of his joy of life and his vitality and his exuberance and all of his, like we said before, part of his personality becomes a little bit weakened, a little bit subdued, only in order that afterwards it could come out and be fully channeled. Right now you're getting 100%. Before you're getting 70% with a lot of not good stuff, so you weaken it down to 30%. And now once you do the tshuva from love, right, of Sukkot and Simchat Torah, so then it comes out, the full force, his full neshama with all of the vitality becomes reestablished. Lahavdil, like if a person takes antibiotics, afterwards you have to, if you really want to like get yourself back in good shape, so you have to take probiotics and eat a lot of probiotic foods and prebiotics, and in order to get your kishkes in a healthful state again, right? In other words, your body is very weakened after taking antibiotics. So too, lahavdil, we need that simchas Torah, and not just in those times of year when we're engaging in tshuva, but also in a person's own personal life. If you're spending some time doing some of that deeper work, you also have to make sure that you're having simple joy. Afterwards, you bring joy back into your life, and it's not always the heavy stuff, because the heavy stuff, whereas it's necessary, it's important, it's vital, it's maybe the most essential work that we do in our life, but if it weakens us, so then we're not really going to be able to be the full person that we're trying to heal, right? The whole purpose of doing that tshuva is that I can be the best me, right? And if I don't come back to me with my full vitality afterwards, right? So then what did I do, right? Okay, gentlemen. God bless. I can't wait to see you guys wearing all white in Beit HaMikdash, dancing Moshiach Tzidkenu, see your full selves with all of your vitality and exuberance.
A question. You were just mentioning how if you suppress one emotion, you're suppressing all of them for the most part. So how do we understand the parts of the Torah, a lot of the Muslims kind of talk about not feeling anger, don't feel jealousy, are those emotions that it's describing, or is it something a little different? Beautiful question.
Yes, some of those are certainly emotions. And at first glance, it definitely looks like they're saying, express these emotions and don't suppress these, right? But really, on a level of avodah, if like I said, if you can't really just suppress one, right? So it's all about channeling. It's about understanding. There's something underneath that anger, right? What's going on underneath that anger? And work with it. Don't just say, okay, I'm never going to. Also doesn't work, by the way, to say I'm never going to get angry again. right? It just doesn't work. He subdues it into and it's like a raging volcano under the surface, and it'll come out in other ways, or he becomes sick in other ways, right? So it's about treating it by understanding it, but also understanding that just because we have emotions, right, which is this is I think is a major mistake in the world of therapy, is just because we have emotions doesn't mean that we should or we're allowed to give expression to every emotion, and that we should give full voice to every emotion. In a therapeutic setting, yeah, you have to work on it, you have to deal with it, you have to understand it, you have to go into the shorish in order to heal, right? But just because you have anger is a great emotion. It's a very important emotion, an amazing teacher. But the last thing that you want to do is to be an angry person.
But it doesn't seem like the text reads that way.
You're right.
You can feel your anger, but more so understand where it's coming from. It's more like just don't feel angry, don't get jealous.
Right. That's a good point. And the reason why that is because, in my understanding, the reason why that is because the earlier Svarim were very much dealing with what's actionable. Right? What's the action you should take? What's the action you should not take? It was very much a guide, as opposed to a guide to like what's right, right? As opposed to a guidebook of how to necessarily get there, right? And so, like one of the things, for instance, about this sefer Orot HaTeshuva, which is so groundbreaking and phenomenal, is that Rav Kook is not just saying, we already have, the Rambam already told us how to do tshuva. We don't need anything more than that. You want more than that? You have Rabbeinu Yonah and Sharei Tshuva. It tells you specific things. You want even more than that? You got the Arizal. It tells you how many fasts you have to do for this sin and how many, right? If you want to know just what to do, Rav Kook is talking about the experience. But what about the part of my soul that's struggling with this part of the experience? I need help in understanding myself. I need to really go understand the experience to be able to do it fully, right? So where those might be like a guide, a vision of what to aspire to, but we really need, and that's what in our generation, or in the last couple generations, what the Svarim, especially in Chassidus, are really describing and teaching us how to do it, as opposed to just knowing what to do, right? So it's certainly only don't be sad, be happy, serve God with joy. But I'm feeling sad right now. What am I supposed to do now? I'm not only am I sad, but I feel bad about being sad, right? And I'm just feeling far from Hashem. So it's to know how to get there, right? To know exactly how to do that, right? But
they knew how to, and all they needed was the instruction to.
It could be that in those generations they needed less instruction than we do, right? And it could be. It certainly is true that our souls are a little bit more sensitive than the previous generations on one level, and just like like in the times of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they had the Mishnah. They didn't need a Gemara. They didn't need it to be written, right? It was clear enough that they could learn it in the Batei Midrash without it being written. A couple generations passed, they saw that they needed the Gemara. A couple generations passed, they saw that the Gemara is not clear anymore. We need Perish Rashi. A couple generations passed, that's not even good enough. A couple generations passed, we need Art Scroll, right? And there's some Art Scrolls that are even difficult to understand what they're talking about, right? So too with the soul, as the generations go, we need more and more explicit instruction, right? As we're getting farther away from that light of Mount Sinai, right? And on the other hand, we're getting closer to the light of the redemption, but it's going to come like a big blast, right? So we don't have necessarily the clarity that they had in those generations. That's how I understand it. Yeah. Curious to hear if there's other opinions about that. It's a great question, a very